Thanks a lot for having accepted my invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Hjoerdis, we are facing very unprecedented times with this COVID-19 crisis. Can you tell me what have been the impacts of this situation on you and how you've been managing your teams and the organization throughout the situation?
So I think that there's always a component of personal and certainly a very large component of professional that you need to look at when you talk about impact. So on a personal side, I have to say things have remained pretty much the same. It's long working hours. Personally, I haven't been that much impacted as many other people may have been, but professionally, it has changed my entire working day. You go from having a very rigid schedule, meetings scheduled, everything already in advance, you know where you're going and you know when you're going to be doing what, and then suddenly you have this full stop. And what you need to bring is agility, speed, and flexibility. You need to be there and you need to make sure that you know what you're doing, and you need to have this agility and flexibility in an operational business to keep it going. So when you get a Friday afternoon deadline that tells you that on Monday morning, nobody that has any children can come to work, they need to make sure that they stay at home with their kids, then in an operational business where you need to keep everything running, and so you need to have the agility and a good team to react. It means making hundreds of phone calls. It means activating people that maybe you would not have activated prior. It means going yourself on the Monday morning at 5:30 to the mailmen's offices and convincing them that, hey, we're going to do it together. So these are things that I just say you need to have the right focus from the very first moment. And it means you don't have much time to think about it. You know, when you're making a big decision, a big business decision, you write a business plan, you look it over, you review it, you take it all over from the beginning again. You don't have that here. So you need to make sure that your decision sits and that it's the correct one. And if you make a mistake, which happens as well, then get it corrected right away. Flexibility is, you know, if somebody needs you, you have to be there. They need to know from the leader that he knows what he's doing. And that requires a lot of flexible thinking and a lot of flexible acting. You change the way you work, you become more flexible, you find ways of making it happen. Difficult, but fun on the other hand. This is the positive side. You're challenged as a leader, which I found interesting. So I was very quickly in our management, in our comics, I was designated as the logistics person, which makes sense because that's what I do. And so, you know, it became part of my job. And at the end of the day, usually we're about 30 people in the area of the office where I sit. And 2 weeks into the crisis, there were just 2 of us. We did everything. You know, we went down to the ramp and unloaded trucks with masks, and we distributed masks, and we filled up plastic containers with gel, and you cannot be above that. It's because it's what is needed right now. And also that goes back to the flexibility, you know, so I don't have a job description for a crisis, but I had a function, and my function was make sure that it keeps running. You know, how do you organize a canteen? How do you make sure your people who are coming to work are getting food and drink? Because there's no coffee machine service. There's no, you know, there's no Coke machine that gets refilled. There's no sandwich machine that gets refilled. So what do you have to do in order to adapt? And these are just all kinds of things that you don't think about on a daily basis, but suddenly you're confronted with it and it needs to work. All of it, communication is key. I think one of the big problems in big organizations is that we tend to use words and not everybody understands. So in a crisis like this, your communication needs to be adapted. It needs to be such that everybody, from the person who carries out the newspaper to the management heads of a company, understand what you're trying to say. And, you know, if you have to repeat yourself 50 times, and if you have to repeat the same message to different groups of people differently, you need to get the communication right. And it's only when you have one communication to everybody and that they all understand that they're going to pull in the same direction. Don't leave any room for interpretation. You know, tell them what's going on. Make sure they understand the decisions that you're taking, and then they'll follow you. And it's only in understanding their problems and understanding where they're coming from that you can adapt your next communication to reach them. You need to show them that you know what you're doing. You need to lead by example. You need to communicate. Don't let anybody tell you, you're asking me to do this, but you're not doing it yourself.
What's going to make a management team efficient in times of crisis? What are the specific qualities of an executive team to make sure that they can lead through these times of uncertainty?
So I think the first main point for a management team is that you have to understand that there's a crisis coming. That sounds really simple, but I believe that part of the problem was that many people underestimated or were maybe not even thinking about this reaching us. So you need to be ahead of the game. That's one of the things that helped us through this crisis is that we have a CEO who very early on, he made a crisis team that was composed of just 3 people, himself, our crisis manager, and 1 operational guy. And they very clearly called out, this is a crisis situation and all hands on deck. Once you've identified it as a crisis, then there's not 7, 8 different ways of doing this. You have a CEO, you have 1 guy who's the head of the ship, and that's the way it's going to go. Now, once you've established the line of command and once you know where you're going and you find that you're adapting to the situation and you're maybe even always 1 step ahead of what's coming next because you're watching what's going on, then you start working as a team and then things fall into place. What has happened is that the executive committee today works together better than 8 weeks ago because we were forced to. There were measures that we took, what you discussed openly. You have a team now. You don't have these 6 individual heads of business units. You have a team of 6 who are sharing their fears, who are sharing, everything that's happening in their services in order to ensure that this one joint project post keeps moving. This is a joint effort, and we're getting our postal services and our post through this together. You need to anticipate. But you also need to give your people time to recuperate. And that's something that we've found has helped as well. So once you understand, there's still a human being. It's not just the manager that's there, and you need to be able to let him come up for air. Then your meetings become much more efficient. Then they become shorter, and you make decisions much faster because you're working as a team.
Yeah, you have been mentioning the importance of adapting and anticipating and recuperating. What are you doing for you personally to manage your energy?
I'm lucky. I have a retired husband who cooks for me, and when I come home, there's dinner on the table, and it doesn't matter at what time I come home. And I have a dog that keeps me active. So I think the nicest part about my day is that in the morning, I get my energy from going on these walks, and I'm by myself with the dog, so I have time to reflect. And usually these are the moments when I get the best ideas or when things fall into place and you're like, oh, I should have thought about that. And so I have my little phone and I take messages for myself. My phone has become my favorite way of picking up messages and leaving myself notes a little bit. And then I get home and then there's a coffee and a fresh pressed orange juice on the table. And those are the little things. These are the little things that make your day. And it's kept my energy up, and I'm surrounded by people who help me laugh, so it's good.
So, and Hjoerdis, now we're entering this deconfinement.
Yeah.
What are specific challenges that you're facing in this context, and how are you coping with those ones?
Actually, what's funny was that I expected the shutdown to be a lot harder than coming back up. But it's the coming back to a supposed normality, which is not a normality because nothing is the way it was before. That is actually proving to be a lot more challenging. I think it's also one of these things of this crisis. Don't take anything for granted. Accept the challenge and go with it, right? And don't give up on the good things that you've put in place. So still continuing our communication, openly talking to people, it's probably more difficult. How do you reassure people that it's okay to come back to work? What do you do with those who don't live in Luxembourg and who have a job contract here, but they live in France and their kids are still not going to school, but our schools are open? So it's funny, you need to take the good and learn from what you've experienced in the crisis, And then you need to put new rules for a new normal in place. It's a little more challenging. You know, we walk around our building in masks, that everybody gets his own table when he's eating lunch in our cafeteria. People are no longer allowed to stand together except for they're wearing a mask. You know, no more than 20 people. Well, it's difficult because we do tend to be very social animals, even at work. And if I speak for me personally, I have 2 colleagues who I've seen every day for 8 weeks on the video screen, but I haven't seen them physically, and it's not the same. I feel like you're losing a very integral part of a relationship. And there's a whole slew of measures that we're taking. So, you know, we're providing plexiglass for open space offices so that people can sit across from each other without having to worry. You know, distributing masks to all of our employees and permanently. So there's not, you know, just 5 masks and you need to make sure you wash them all the time. No. We have enough, and we're going to be buying the stuff as much as we need to in order to provide you with the safety feeling that you need. And we're slowly bringing back groups of people who we find are essential to being here. But we're also leaving those people who are doing fantastic jobs from the home office at home, because we find that there are those that handle it better, that can still keep the team idea going without worrying about their contacts. And there are others who need a lot more contact. So
Hjoerdis, you were mentioning the importance of being really in connection in between people as well, and the link it has with team cohesion. What are specific actions that you're thinking to take to really reinforce team cohesion within the organization?
I think that we will be finding team cohesion via bringing people back, or groups of people back to work on regular schedules, meaning you have one half of a group come in for 1 week and then the second half come in for the next week, and leave the first half at home, and just find ways of getting people to come back into the office where you have the 2 meters respected, where you have your masks respected, and where they can see each other. Knowing full well that you cannot bring back entire groups of teams as you did before. So that also will need to be managed. I think that a lot can also be done via, again, we're coming back to communication. We have, you know, we found new ways of communicating as teams. You work online, you get on a WebEx and you see 6, 8, 10 people. And take your time, find out how everybody's doing. Give everybody 2 minutes of personal time to just report on how he's been, and you know, put his issues on the table and listen actively to what they're saying, because I think then you can also put in place new measures, right? And yourself as well as a manager, and be open about what you're experiencing. First and foremost, also for our teams, we're also human beings, and you know, I have the same fears and I have the same constraints, and I have my worries, and if I'm talking actively to my people about them, maybe that will help them also to understand that there is a way forward and there's a way out. So I think that again, communication is going to be key. Bringing people back together is also important. I feel it myself that I miss my colleagues. I miss seeing them, because of the little nuances that you have in a conversation. By hand movements or body movements, they get lost over WebEx or whatever you're using as a tool. And it's difficult to gauge, you know, how are you doing in the conversation? You don't know, because you're not getting the instantaneous feedback. But let's be careful with it, because there's no reason to, after 8 weeks and in a lifespan of a company, or in the year of our business year, 8 weeks is nothing. You know, take the time necessary to slowly bring people back together.
So what are all the positive dimensions that you identify from this crisis?
We have identified people who are just fabulous. You find that people love this company. They show up for work. They've been there for us. You know, they're happy to be here. They appreciate what you're doing for them. And I think that that's probably the nicest thing that's come out of this crisis, that you've seen that most of them are extremely dedicated to their work and to their employer. So, you know, you find that people are flexible, that people understand where you're going, and and you become more confident about your organization as such. We talked about the home office. You know, we found that some people are actually a lot more effective when they don't have to be out on the road. We have people who needed to stay at home with their kids. You know, they're managing their professional life maybe even better than if we're requiring them to come into work, because they have the opportunity to stay at home. So these are models that we will need to start looking into. We've decided one of the decisions that came out of this crisis too is that we've said, you know, people are so fed up coming into work at between 7 and 9 in the morning, which are the hours that we expect people to come to work. You know, hey, let them come in at whatever time they want in the morning, avoid the traffic, you know, have confidence in them, and then get them to work their 8 hours the way it's good for them. So, you know, we're changing our work models because we've seen that it works. So these are things that we would not have questioned prior, but I think it's very good learnings. And the last, and I think not the least at all, is that we have a management team in place now that was a fantastic team because we've lived through this.
Hjoerdis, as a conclusion, your experience, of leading in certain times, what are the key insights that you would share with any leader or entrepreneur who's watching us now? So how to lead in uncertain times, what are your key insights?
First thing is be prepared. And I think that if we learned anything at all, listen to what's happening outside because it can be closer than you think. Second thing for me is take it day by day. You know, you're not going to solve the crisis from now to tomorrow. And obviously that's depending on what kind of a crisis you're in. You know, if it's something explodes, something burns, you need to react differently. But this is something for the long haul. So take it day by day and you know, don't stress the details. Just make sure you keep moving and keep moving it forward. Another thing is show presence. You need to, as a manager, you're the last one that should be staying at home. So you need to be there. You need to show presence. So that means get out of your office, move around your organization, go see people that you usually wouldn't see if you can physically reach them. Call people, talk to them, ask them how they're doing. Your home office people, give them a call at least once a week so that they know you haven't forgotten them. And you know, celebrate the little things. Our first meeting when we were back together as a management team, it was like a party. You know, everybody was happy. Take an hour and discuss about your personal life, everything that you've been living through. You find you have insights there. You know, and there's something that always works for me, and that's part of my life, is don't let your sense of humor go. There are always funny situations in something like this. And, you know, make a list of what was funny and make a list of what you laughed about, because you got tough times coming, you know, and if you're not smiling through it, and if you're not at least laughing at one or the other thing, it's going to be very hard. Last, probably the most important, is you need a good, strong communication. If you're not talking to your people, you're going to lose. And it's adapted communication. I'm not going to talk to, as I said before, my mail carrier, my newspaper carrier, the same way I'm going to talk to my boss. So the messages need to be understood. And at the end of the day, you've talked all day. You've talked and you've talked and you've talked. It's on the phone, and it's here and it's there, and you're tired. Yeah, get your downtime in. Make sure that you find something that will give you the energy you need to last.